Well, you'd be surprised what you can do and hide.
Yeah. Well, happy Tuesday evening. We're back. The summer doldrums are tapering away, and the winter radio season is coming upon us. And this is a ham radio class for folks who already have their general class amateur radio license in the United States, and they'd like to upgrade to the amateur extra. I'm Gary, ham radio call sign Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee, hence the name of the channel and all. And we have tonight a Zoom classroom with participants and also some folks watching us on YouTube as well. So we're happy to have you along. This is a Chapter 1 class, and when I say that, we refer to the book that we use, which is the American Radio Relay League License Manual for the Extra class, the 13th edition. This is the book that you would want to get to participate in the class, and we go chapter by chapter throughout the book. It's an excellent book. Extra material in the book, more than you really need to pass the test. We'll talk more about the test here in a second. But this is pretty much how we base the class, although we do not read from the book. We have a limited time frame. We're going to be meeting for 16 weeks, 2 hours maximum on Tuesday nights. And so in that time frame, we have to cover a lot of test questions that might be asked you on a multiple choice test. And so we highlight, we skim through, but we give you all of the information you need to go more in depth to get more knowledge. We tell you that when you get your ham radio license, no matter what the class, it's a license to learn. So this class will not make you an electronic expert, but it'll certainly help carry you through to the finish line in order to get your amateur extra class license. So let's go ahead and get started, Bruce. Let's go to the laptop. This is the introduction session, which corresponds to Chapter 1 in the book, which is also an introduction. And by that we mean there are no test questions. In Chapter 1 or tonight, we won't be covering any of the test questions. Rather, we're just testing our Zoom and YouTube connectivity. We've already worked through an audio problem earlier tonight. We're going to talk about the class with an overview. We'll do some introductions. I'll tell you a bit about myself, and Dave can tell you a little bit about himself, because we have two instructors. Dave, KE4EA, is over here, and he'll be joining us then after our break to tell us a little bit about math and learning for the extra class. So we're going to have a lot of fun, and then we'll hear from you all at the end with something I call the class chat, so that we can get going. If you miss a class, if you can't make it to the Zoom classroom, we have a YouTube channel where we stream the class live, and it's also recorded there as well. So this is the URL for the YouTube channel. If you're watching us on YouTube, and you'd like to formally participate, I would ask you please to send me an email to w4eey@arrl.net and say, Gary, please add me to the extra class YouTube mailing list. And when I do that, that way you'll get all of our announcements and all of the links that we will provide throughout the class. So that's where we are, that's where we're going. Why would you want to upgrade to the extra class? Well, for some folks, it's because you get extra short call signs. K4RM is one of our good friends. That's a 1x2, and those call signs are restricted to amateur extra class operators. It's one of the benefits. And in pileups and DX conditions and things like that, a shorter call sign can be in fact worth it. More frequencies, we have incentive licensing in the United States, and you get more frequencies, not a lot, but it's where the DX lives a lot of times, so that can be very beneficial to you. I say more communications modes, technically maybe not, but I think you're going to be more interested in trying out some of the things that we talk about, whether it be digital modes, radio teletype, or other things. You'll be invigorated into those modes, and you'll have a greater understanding of technology and engineering. And once you're an amateur extra, then you're at the peak of the licensing in the United States, and through your club or your group, you can give back. You can help newcomers get into the hobby. You remember when you got started, how difficult it might have been. Well, maybe you can help them out. You can become a volunteer examiner for an exam session and oversee all of the tests because you'll have the amateur extra. So briefly, to get an extra class license, you have to pass Element 2, the technician class, Element 3, the general class, and then Element 4, the extra class test. Now, the test is a multiple choice test. It's a 50 question test as opposed to 35 questions, which are on the others. There are some special exceptions here. If you've had an expired license and you let it lapse, it was not revoked by the FCC, you may be able to get your extra class back just by passing the technician test, the Element 2. That has happened to some of our students, so just be aware of that. Morse code. Oh, I can't get my ham license because I can't do Morse code. It's not required anymore. It used to be. It's still very popular, but Morse code is no longer a requirement for any class of license in amateur radio. So tomorrow I'll be sending all of you who are on the mailing list information and a link to a Dropbox folder, and in that Dropbox folder will be a PDF of this session and this the PowerPoint presentation. This is kind of small, the writing here, but this is our schedule. These are the things that we're going to be going over through the class. We're looking for our last class session to be December the 16th, which means that we are targeting extra by Christmas. We want you to be able to get your extra class license by Christmas, and you can, in fact, do it. Where are you going to take your exam? Well, I want you to know that now. Now, because you're going for the extra, you've already had some experience in taking exams, so you already may have an answer for this. But for those who haven't, you can find a radio license exam using this American Radio Relay League URL, and that's a resource for you. Or you can use hamstudy.org/sessions. And I like this because this is where you can find online testing. If there's no local testing going on in your area, then you can test online. The Anchorage, Alaska group is highly recommended by many of our students, by the way. So for the extra class, we're going to be talking about 602 questions. We'll go over each and every one of the questions and the answers, wanting to make sure that you know what the right answer is and why it's the right answer. So out of that question pool of 602, your test will be 50 of those. And it doesn't seem it's organized, but it is organized in such a way that you'll get maybe only one question from one section or two questions from another section to make up the 50 questions. And you need to get 74% right in order to pass the exam. And we're going to provide also a link to the Dropbox with a PDF with right answers, test questions and just the right answers, with the goal for you to kind of find this reference between the question and answer automatically. So think about where you're going to be taking your test, and maybe go ahead and schedule your test already sometime toward the end of December 2025. Of course, you can always take your test earlier than that if that's what you want to do. We ask you to please, have your book with you when you come to class here. You're coming to class at home via Zoom. Thanks, COVID. That's how we got started. And bring a scientific calculator. We recommend this one, and Dave's going to talk more about it. That's the Texas Instruments TI-36X Pro. All of our instruction keystroke by keystroke will be done using this calculator. You should probably also sign up for a free account at the ARRL Exam Review website. The URL is there. Let me turn on my laser pointer. There we go. Right there. That's the URL for the Exam Review website. You do not need to be an ARRL member to establish a free account there. And then you can review test questions chapter by chapter. They have that capability there. So it goes along with the book, it goes along with the videos. It's right on target. And you can use this to review the chapter questions. So Other videos, you'll find a lot of videos on YouTube about amateur radio and the extra class specifically. Just make sure that they're using the current question pool because a lot of videos live on the internet forever and the question pool changes every 3 years. Dave Kassler has had videos on the extra class, and we're going to be providing links to that for you for his videos as well. For his, you have to be an ARRL member. Ask questions in class, ask questions by email, talk to each other, communicate. We're here to help you, and also get together with your fellow students. Now, I mentioned Dave Kassler and his videos. They're at the American Radio Relay League Learning Center. And if you're an ARRL member, this is a resource for you. So you should probably go there and poke around a little bit. And he has videos also that correspond to the chapters and sections that we'll be talking about. Dave Kassler does. KE0OG, the original gangster of YouTube amateur radio videos. So we recommend, he does what he calls introductions. He doesn't teach the test. He doesn't teach the questions, but he gives you background and supplementary information, which maybe is what you need to have to say, oh, that's what they're talking about. So every little bit helps. Speaking of every little bit, we'll also be sending tomorrow in the email a link to something we started last year. It's a Discord study server. It's exclusively for W4EEY students, past and current. If you're watching us on YouTube and you'd like to be part of this Discord server, just send me an email at w4eey@arrl.net and say, please send me the Discord invitation, and I'll send that out to you. And you'll find that there are sections there for technician class, general class, and extra class specifically, but there's also general sections. You can actually link up with other students on audio and video. It's got a lot of capabilities that, well, you experiment. This came from a student. We didn't push this. Somebody asked for this. So it's a great resource, and we'd love you to take advantage of it. You're a resource too, did you know that? Because you've been in this ham radio game for a while yourself, and you're going to have some stories. So as we go along and we're talking about things, if you've got a story that you think might clarify a point, we'll have you, unmute and come on in and tell us about what's going on, and that might help somebody else to understand. A ham radio license is a license to learn, and we love having fun. This is fun, believe it or not, for Dave and I to do this and to get this going. We'll give you a studio tour here in a little bit. It's fun for us to be able to do that here. Join a local ham radio club. If you're not already a member of a good club, well, here's a resource, again, from ARRL to find a club in your area. And not all clubs are created equal. So you may go to a club, sit down and say, these guys are not for me. Okay, fine, no problem. Find another club and sit down and try it again as a guest. They should welcome you with open arms, and they can be helpful in your journey up to the amateur extra as well. Have fun. Learn something and share what you have learned. All right, I've talked enough for the moment, so what I'd like to do now is to turn it over to Dave for some introductions. Dave, tell us maybe a little bit how I roped you into this a while back, and then I'll give you a bit about my background, and then I'll give you a quick studio tour.
All right, well, that sounds good. I typically spend my entire Tuesday, especially when I'm teaching, which will be the next 5 weeks in a row, some of it, getting ready for this. So by the time we get to our class at 6:30, I'm really excited to be together with you all, and I hope it shows. So how did I get started? Well, my dad was kind of interested in listening to police radio. We lived in Milwaukee at the time. And I was interested in AM broadcast station DXing. In other words, how many AM broadcast stations could I hear on our little 5-tube radio? And back then, some of the electronic magazines had all of the call signs for all of the AM stations in the United States. So I'd go looking for those. So that kind of got me interested in radio at a very early stage. And we're continuing on here in the late 60s. I got licensed in junior high school as a novice. Back then we had what was called a novice license. And from there I went on to the general class and the advanced license. I wound up getting a job at what's called a Motorola service station. That's a two-way radio shop that services AM radio, or FM radios, excuse me, for police and fire and commercial. So I could only work after school at nights, so they let me fix radios all by myself because the shop was closed. So that was a tremendous learning experience, and that experience working on Motorola radios eventually got me into the company itself. And I had a wonderful 30-year career at Motorola. Had 2 or 3 wonderful experiences there, or separate careers, I guess you could almost say. So that was wonderful. It started out as a tech rep, helping people that were having problems that they couldn't solve for customers. Then we got into cellular in the very early days, and I was responsible for turning up probably the first 20 cellular systems around the country that were Motorola. And the company had been downsizing, getting to the end of the 30 years, and the downsizing finally caught up with me, and that wound up taking us to South Carolina. We were in Illinois at the time. I was working for a university in the telecom department for 5 years, and then they had some downsizing and finally wound up at Kemet Electronics. I don't know if any of you have heard of them, but they're a humongous capacitor manufacturing organization. Then a couple of years later, they decided they wanted to move our entire IT department from South Carolina to Orlando, Florida, and that wasn't for me. So it was at that point that I kind of assessed what the options were and decided to retire. And so I've been retired for about 8 years now, and so I can do a lot more ham radio. And many people have said that when you're retired, you're as busy, or if not busier, than you were when you were working. That's certainly been my case, but really enjoying it because you can do it on your own time. So I've been doing quite a bit of POTA, Parks on the Air, some Summits on the Air. Those are operating activities we may be talking about throughout the course. Do a lot of contests. I love contesting and DX. A lot of the CW 1-hour contests. There's several of them that run every week. And Gary mentioned how I got roped into this. It was at the end of 2016. I had relicensed back in 2016 after having been off the air for about 20 years. And Gary sent me a text message, said, "Dave, I want to talk to you about something." So he had this brilliant idea of maybe starting a licensing class. And I thought, well, yeah, I'd like to try that. So we started off the following January, and we started right off with the big kahuna. We started off with the extra class. So maybe we weren't so bright to do that.
Fools rush in.
Yeah, but it went okay. It went okay, and we've been doing it ever since, so a number of years. So that's kind of my story, and we'll be sharing more about ourselves as we move on through the coming weeks. Thank you.
Very good. Thanks, Dave. Well, I'm also a Midwest boy, born and raised in Midland, Michigan. And if you're a Michigander, you always hold your hand up and, right there in the middle. And I had the advantage in that it was a company town, Dow Chemical, and very well-established public school systems that had also an electronics major in high school. And so I was able to take electronics for 2 hours every day for 2 years as a junior and senior in high school in the Midland Public Schools back then. Thank you, Mr. Zielinski. Greatly appreciate your instruction. And at that time, I was interested in long-distance AM DXing, and then shortwave radio, shortwave listening, and hearing Radio Moscow, Radio Tirana, Radio Peking, fascinating. And they would have English language services. So, and I was, not that old, I'm a teenager, got my first job based on the fact that I got my novice ham radio license when I was 16 years old, and I was also then able to work at the Radio Shack store in Midland, and my license was my ticket in. And since then, worked, went to Central Michigan University, go Chips, and majored in broadcasting, and have a science minor with them as well, which comes in handy here in the instruction. Worked in broadcasting on the engineering side and in production, and finally ended up over at the NBC then, television affiliate in Saginaw, Michigan, which was WNEM TV, on the engineering staff, and over half of the engineers on staff were hams as well. I had let my license, my novice license, lapse years ago, but they said, Gary, you should get your license back. I could do that. And I did, and it's been going, that was the mid-1980s, and I've been going strong ever since. Left that job and went to work for the Voice of America back in 1988. I was a field service engineer, a foreign service officer, and spent 14 of my 20 years with the Voice of America at overseas transmitting stations. Liberia, West Africa, Tangier, Morocco, Munich, Germany, Kavala, Greece, a bunch of different places, and in most of those places I was licensed as a ham radio operator, so that the hobby just, it was yin and yang. It just worked together perfectly. And I retired from Voice of America in 2008. I came to Greenville, South Carolina, which is where my second wife and I settled. It was a great fit. Got involved with the Greer Amateur Radio Club, which is where I met Dave. Great club, by the way, if you want to come to the upstate of South Carolina, the Greer Amateur Radio Club. Stop in for a visit. You'd be more than welcome. And yeah, we started teaching. I first started teaching to prepper groups in the upstate, just the technician class. Then we added the general class, and then the extra class, and then COVID hit, and we couldn't do it in the classroom setting anymore. So we decided, well, let's try this Zoom thing. Let's see if we could do it there, and the rest is history. We've been doing it here on Zoom for over 5 years. I don't know how long now exactly. So we are very, very thankful to have you along with us. One nice thing about having a studio, which is where we have right here, is that we don't have to carry the equipment up and down the stairs and set it up every night, which is what we were doing before. Let me just show you around the studio, and I want to thank folks who've made donations to this channel, because your donations have helped fund some of the upgrades, and we have a nice new upgrade I'll show you here at the end. But let's go left to right from your point of view. Let's take a look at the calculator cam first. It's a camera on a calculator, but it allows us to keystroke by keystroke show you what's going on the Texas Instruments calculator. So if you get your own, you'll be able to see it and follow along, and hopefully it will clarify things for you. The main camera is what I call the pod camera. It's right here at the podium. This is where the instructor will be, and we would change off. So next week, for example, I'll be the main instructor, but Dave also has another math session. But we alternate, so Dave might be up here or I'll be up here. If we need to illustrate something, go ahead and go overhead there if you would, Bruce. Yeah, there's the studio. I can walk over to the blackboard, and then we can put stuff up on the blackboard, do diagrams, do drawings. Sometimes you communicate better with pictures than you do with words. But the newest thing, come on over here. We have a smart board for the first time, so the smart board is going to allow us to put up some supplementary presentations to help illustrate what's going on. We're still learning how to use it. Hello? Okay, there we go. During the class, we'll be talking about receivers, HF receivers, and the specifications. What does reciprocal mixing dynamic range mean? What is sensitivity, selectivity? How do you measure it? Two-tone tests, things like that. This is Rob Sherwood's website where he ranks the receivers, so we'll try to demystify what some of the things on his website mean. Also, Dave's going to have a great presentation on propagation. which is key and critical to where signals are going to go and propagate, and knowing that it can be key to your efforts. Right now, I'm having fun on the 160 meter band. I've never really played around on 160 meters, but Bruce helped me put up an inverted L vertical antenna, and I got to brag on myself a little bit. I was calling CQ this morning on FT8, and Australia called me back. Victor Kilo 2, Oscar November, thank you so much. That's a distance record for me, certainly, on 160 meters, 1.84 megahertz. Wow. So propagation, that's what makes it happen. We're also talking about digital modes, FT8, that I was using with the WSJTX software. You'll find out more about that. Oh, the Smith chart, the voodoo of the Smith chart. You'll find out more about that and how to use it in practical applications. Not in depth, but we'll give you enough. There's just so much more to come, and so we're so happy to have you with us here on the channel. So what we want to do now is we're going to take 5 minutes. We'll take a break. Dave's going to come up and move over to the pod, and he'll tell us a little bit about some of the math things that we might have forgotten in our aging process, so to speak. 5 minutes. We'll see you in a bit.
Greetings. It's good to be with you. And we'll be talking about some math and learning next. You can see from the slide that's up, my contact information is there. I always put that on the first slide of each part that I do. That way you can get a hold of me if you have questions. The email address works, translates through to my regular one, and my cell phone is there too. I do actually take cell phone calls from people that have questions, and usually when you get a weird number on your cell phone, most people will just not answer it, but I do because it might be one of you. So I get some marketing calls that way too, but to me it's worth it. So I wanted to provide that for you. Now I'm going to comment on chapter 4. If any of you have kind of flipped through the book and looked at chapter 4, you might have, you weren't scared, you were probably terrified. There's a lot of stuff in chapter 4 that you don't actually need for the test. And when I was studying for the extra, it was back in January, February of 2016, I didn't know that a lot of the stuff in the book wasn't needed. So I really worked hard to try to learn everything that was there. You don't need to do that. I'm going to spare you a lot of that pain. In fact, there's some scary looking trigonometry in chapter 4. And with the calculator that we're recommending, you won't need to do a trig at all. So some of you might want to say, thank you, Dave. So just, yay, okay. So what I'm going to try to do over the next 3 weeks, tonight, be a bit of an intro. Next week, we're going to get into more on the calculator and work through some examples. And we're actually going to do probably the most difficult problem in chapter 4 next week together. I'll kind of walk you through it step by step, and I'm hoping with that and some practice on your own, you'll be in good shape when we get to chapter 4 to get into the meat and potatoes of the rest of it there. So try to have your calculator for next week if you can. And my goal tonight and next week for that matter is to try to convince you that it's not as bad as it seems, okay? You really can do this, even if you don't have a technical background or a math background or anything like that. So I'm going to try to convince you that you can get through this. So, and next week we'll get into it in more detail. All right, so since we're talking about numbers and math, I thought I'd put some mystery numbers up here. See if we can figure out what some of these are. Well, 602, Gary already mentioned, that is the number of questions in the question pool. That you could get any one of these on your test. 10, okay, 10 is the number of chapters in our book, and it's also the number of sub-elements that comprise all of the pool questions. I'll talk more about that coming up. 50, we've heard that number already tonight. That's the number of questions on the test, and it's also the number of groups within the sub-elements. It's kind of interesting that it's the same number. Well, it turns out that there's one and only one test question from each one of the 50 groups. Getting more into that in a bit. That's really good news. Now 37 and 13, Gary mentioned it, but maybe not the same way that I am. You need to get 37 right to pass the test, which means you can get up to 13 incorrect. 90% plus. We don't have any hard statistic on this, but I'm really convinced that what I'm about to tell you is true. The vast majority of our students that go through this with us and do the work. Now, what I mean by doing the work, doing reviews between classes that we have and doing the practice tests, the people that actually will apply themselves and do that, they'll pass. So you're going to pass. You do the work, you're going to pass. So extra class math questions, I said not as hard as you may think, and then emphasize that with a really. So the next few slides I hope will convince you of that. And I already said that chapter 4 is, it looks really scary, but that's all right. I'm going to tell you the pages you can skip, and there's quite a few of them. So For those of you that are math inclined, I don't know if we have any engineers in our group. We've had a few in the past. So some of you that are mathematically inclined may really be into this and want to go through everything that there is in Chapter 4. For the other 99% of you that just want to pass your test, we're going to give you enough so that you can do that. We'll focus in on what's really necessary. So with that, we'll jump in to another level of detail, the point being trying to convince you that this isn't as bad as it first looks. I mentioned that there were 10 chapters in the book. There were 10 sub-elements. These 10 sub-elements are labeled this way. They don't exactly correspond to the chapters in our book, but I'll put up something that I did here over on the calculator cam to zoom it out. I think you should be able to see that. So sub-element 1, E1, is commission rules. That roughly corresponds to chapter 3 in our book. And you'll see that there's some subsections here. Sub-element E2, operating procedures, that's approximately, it covers the material in chapter 2, and so forth. The sub-elements don't match the chapters in the book. And the one that we're going to be focusing in on is sub-element 5, which is chapter 4 in our book, and that's where all of the heavy technical stuff is regarding math. So I just kind of wanted to give you an overview here, page 1-14 in our book. You might be wondering why the sub-elements and the chapters aren't the same. Well, the sub-elements are what the group that puts together the exam, that's how they approach, that's how they group the material. That isn't always the easiest way to teach it, though. So the ARRL has done a lot of work putting it into chapters that flow well and take all of this information and put it into individual chapters for us. So that's why the sub-elements and the chapters in our book are not the same, even though there's 10 of each. Now within each of the sub-elements, there's groups. Okay, so in E5, that's the one where the heavy math stuff is, chapter 4 in our book. There's 5 groups. Just point that out. Now the next interesting fact is that if you add all of these up, E1 has got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and it continues on. You don't count these while I'm trying to speak, but rest assured there's 50 of them here, okay? Now, there's a correlation. There is one and only one test question from each one of these groups. And that is really, really good information. I'm going to be showing you on the next slide why that's very, very good information. We'll be zeroing in on E5. It turns out that there's only, within E5, there's only 4 calculation questions of 12 that are there. So you've only got about a 25% chance of getting a calculation question from this group. So it is possible, and being a volunteer examiner, I did take a pass through all 10 tests that we use in the Westcars VEC, and I did actually find one test that had no calculation questions in it at all. So that could happen. But most of us aren't going to be that lucky. Normally you might see 2, one or two calculation questions. And I'll explain a little bit more about that as we go along. So I'm trying to prove that if you have extreme difficulty with math, you're still going to be okay. So electrical principles, chapter 4, it's in sub-element E5. And these are some of the things that are in sub-element E5. So E5A, that scared of some of these words, they'll make more sense as we get into it, but resonance and Q, half power bandwidth, and phase relationships. All right, there's 13 questions in this group. There's 4 calculation questions, you will only get one question out of E5A. So there's a pretty good chance, like a 75% chance, that you're not going to get a calculation question from E5A, because there's only 4 of the 13 questions involve a calculation. E5B, time constants, phase relationships, phase angles. Again, maybe new terms to you, but we'll go into them gently. Same story, same basic ratio of calculation questions to questions in the group. Then rectangular and polar coordinates, same thing. And then E5D, is power factor and reactive power. There's no calculation questions in this particular group. So that's, I'm building good news upon good news here in terms of what you're likely to see. Now, you could take the attitude, and I'm hoping that you won't. I'm hoping that you want to learn and you would like to have the satisfaction of being able to do some of these. But you could take the attitude, if you want, that I hate math, I'm not going to do math, I'm just going to skip those questions. Well, it's probably only going to be maybe 1 or 2 questions in your exam that will be calculations. So if you take that attitude, you're probably still going to be okay if you can get the rest of the percentages correct to pass the exam. But we're hoping that you'll apply yourself and try this, because it is within your grasp, definitely. So what are our learning objectives here? Well, for the math part, we want you to have the confidence to pass the math questions on the exam. Let me pause for just a second and ask our class, how many of you would like to get 100% on your extra exam? Just kind of raise your hand if you'd like to be able to do that. Okay, we've got some other folks, and it's perfectly fine if you just want to pass. You don't care if you get 100%. But we're going to touch on every the 602 questions. We're going to touch on every one of them as we go through these 16 weeks, or at least one of every type. There's some that are just variations of others, but we're going to go through it all. So we're going to give you the ability to get 100% on your test. Relatively few students do. But we do have maybe 5–10% of our students do wind up with 100%. So it's worth going for. So we want to give you the confidence to pass those questions. Personal growth and insight. Some of this stuff will serve you well throughout your ham radio career, as I like to call it. Some of it you'll only need for the exam, but there's useful stuff. And then as you're chatting with other hams and going to club meetings, you'll be able to relate to some of the conversations that are going on, having been through this. There's in some cases, you won't need to actually do the calculation for a calculation type question. I'll be sharing some estimation tools and some tips and techniques and some tricks that are kind of built into the way the questions are worded that will allow you to answer some of them correctly without having to do the calculation. So we have some assumptions about you. First of all, let's look at this poor ant over here. I don't know if you knew this, but ants can carry about 20 times their body weight. Well, you might be looking at the material for the extra class and feel like this ant here. But we'll give you a helping hand. So math assumptions about you. You may have been discouraged from taking the extra exam sooner. You might still be discouraged, but we're going to help you through that. Now, some people feel like the study guide questions are intimidating, and I'll have to say, if you don't have a technical background, or haven't had math ever, then they will probably appear intimidating, but that's okay. We're going to help you with that. We assume that you are not an electrical engineer. We've had a few engineers in our class, but very few. We're not only thinking that you are not an electrical engineer, but you don't want to become one, okay? So we can relate to that. We're assuming that you've been exposed to high school algebra. It might have been 100 years ago, but that's okay. There's a formula over here that it's actually an equation for an ellipse, which isn't in our book at all. The only reason that I show it is that they show a formula x squared over a squared, and all of this kind of junk. Our calculator, the TI-36X Pro, will let us enter values exactly as they appear in a formula. So the formulas that do apply in our study are very easy to plug in, and then you press enter and you get an answer. You don't have to solve for any values, and the way they appear in the formula is exactly the way they'll look when you put them into the calculator, if you follow our examples. So you can kind of relate to values, and if this, at least the basic appearance of this is something you've seen before, you're well on the way. We assume that you are motivated to pass the extra exam. That's why you're all here. You bought your book, you signed up for the class. So that speaks highly of your motivation. As Gary said, your current license is a license to learn, not only the material for the extra, but going forward as well. And we're assuming that you're open to try new approaches to learning. There's some people have a certain way that they study, and we're going to assume that you're open to considering some other ways of learning, because if you put them all together, you'll have a better chance. One quick story, I had one fella that went through our class that didn't pass it. In fact, he failed it twice. He was in the area here, so his name was Murph. That's what he went by. So I offered to meet him at Starbucks, and we met at Starbucks for about, I don't know, eight weeks in a row, just going through everything he was stuck on in some of the chapters. So I got a lot of free coffee that way. And then Murph took his test and passed it. And he said, "Today is the happiest day of my life." So that was rewarding. And we're going to share everything that we can to help you pass it on the first try. But if you don't, for whatever reason, there's help available. Another motivation to pass the extra, Gary mentioned the extra frequencies. If you get into DXing or contesting and you see something really juicy, some Australia or New Zealand or something that you don't have in your logbook, and is spotted on a network, and he's there, you're all excited. You really, really want to work that guy. Before you do, you have to consider where that person is calling in the band. Similarly, in a contest, when things are going hot and heavy, and people are in a big hurry to make as many contacts as they can, it's real easy to get into the part of the band where you don't have privileges. So a number of people have told us that their motivation for wanting to get the extra is to not accidentally be transmitting on the wrong portion of the band. So we're going to help you with that. So good news, there's a lot more in the license manual than what you actually need. We'll be pointing those out. Keep calm, I have good news. There's going to be a maximum of 3 exam questions from Chapter 4 on the Electrical Principles chapter. That's a maximum. Usually from the tests I've seen being a VE, there's 1 or 2 typically from that chapter. The formulas are what we call plug and play or plug and chug. In other words, the way that the formula is laid out is exactly how you put it into the calculator. You don't have to solve for any values within a formula. There is even a little psychology here. There's formulas versus equations, okay? Well, equations, that sounds like math. So I like to use the term formula because a formula is like a recipe. Once you know the recipe, you just put in the right ingredients and press enter, and presto changeo, you've got it solved. So the formulas are plug and play. They don't demand any advanced algebra knowledge. And in some cases, you won't even need to use the calculator, and I'll share some tips and techniques for doing that. There's estimation techniques, and sometimes the way the question is worded, it pretty much gives you the answer. We'll be sharing those along the way. And as I mentioned already, the TI-36X Pro will allow us to eliminate the need to use trigonometry. There's some rectangular to polar conversion that needs to be done to solve some of the phase angle problems, but the way that we're going to set up the calculator that's very easy. You put it in one form, press enter, and it automatically gives you the answer in the other form. That's the biggest reason why I recommend this specific calculator. Now, there's something that I like to call learner preferences. A lot of people can relate to this because they'll see themselves in some of these descriptions. It's not necessarily true that if you're presented information with your favorite learning preference that you learn it better. So I'm going to encourage you to try all of these methods along the way. First of all is visual. That's visual guides and models. Okay, that's show me. Okay, that's a good description of my wife. My wife has her extra. She went through this class with us, and she felt like she couldn't really have me teaching it and her not be an extra. So, and it was wonderful working with her because she asked questions that I never would have thought anybody else would ask, and that really helped me as an instructor. So visual guides and models. Show me. I want to see it on a whiteboard. Next is auditory. This is oral communications and written language. Tell me or give me a book. That's me. If I have a book, if I'm motivated to try to understand something, I do just fine by Googling it, looking in a book. There's so many good reference books for amateur radio. That's how I operate. That's my preferred method of learning. And then there's kinesthetic, big long word. It means you learn best by doing, kind of a hands-on sort of thing. So with that, I'm just curious in our group, I'll leave this up so you can see it, but how many of you just by reason, and you can be in more than one, how many would consider yourselves to be a visual learner? You just wave, okay, there's a few. How many would would be in the auditory category? Give me a book. Yeah, okay, a few. And then kinesthetic, learn by doing. Very good, yeah. And some people are putting thumbs up symbols on our screen too, so that's good. Yeah, we've got a good mix. Some more good news. We're going to try to give you a little flavor of all of those ways. But if there's something that you don't normally go to, consider doing it. Read the license manual, listen to our presentations, try the examples. These things all work together to help you to learn. So what is our success plan? Well, we're going to have a very tight focus on learning aligned with the extra exam. What I mean by that, we focus our classes on around the material that is actually going to be on the exam. We don't do that by going question by question and just giving you the answers. We try to give you enough background and context so that you know why the right answer is the right answer. It's a lot easier to remember that way, and it'll serve you going forward. We'd like for you to understand how to work the formulas and have the satisfaction of having done it. Some of these you may never do again after passing the test, but we'd like you to have the satisfaction of being able to do it, and the satisfaction for those that wanted to do 100% to be able to know how to do that. So we'll be working through all of the exam pool questions, or at least one of each type. Our tool set consists of the license manual, which hopefully you've already got, the calculator, which we talked about, and something called the extra class reference sheet. This is a one-page document that I'll be sending out to everybody, and it has all of the formulas and some of the helps that you need all in one place. It makes it a lot easier than going through chapters. Well, in chapter 4, all of the pages in that chapter, for example. And something called the growth mindset. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, the concept of a mindset. There's two. There's a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. A growth mindset is described as folks who believe their mental capabilities are elastic. They can learn more. They can become smarter. I can do this if I work at it. And I'm hoping that that's everybody in our class here. Contrasted with a fixed mindset, which says my capability to expand is limited, so I will not try. I'm not good at this, and I'll never be good at it. That's what we call a fixed mindset. And more good news here. Just by thinking about how you think, you can be more of the growth mindset if you'd put yourself in the fixed mindset category. It's very easy. You just think a little bit differently, and you'll be amazed. We're going to introduce Barbara Oakley next week, and she's written some very interesting books about learning how to learn. And she basically started out loving animals, and in college she studied languages. She was a Russian interpreter. But she realized at one point in her career that not being able to do the technical stuff or understand it was holding her back. So she made an all-out effort to become good at that, to learn it. It wasn't easy, but she's now a professor of engineering in a college. So that's amazing, just by changing the way you think about something. So yeah, more about her next week. Something that I'll throw out here, it's optional technique, but many have found it to be very useful, called a memory dump sheet. It's something that you create. I talked about the extra class reference guide. That's not the same as this. Now the memory dump sheet is something that you create and write down the things that you're worried about forgetting. It might be some formulas, might be some facts. And what you do is you put it on paper and then you memorize it. You grab a blank sheet of paper and try to reproduce your memory dump sheet. This gives you the little assists that you may need during the exam. Well, why might this be valuable? Well, some people, when they look at the first question on the exam, their mind turns to mush, all right? So if you've got some of this written down, it provides a bridge to recalling what you need to know to answer that question. And sometimes the questions are written in a way that will kind of trip you up. So the memory dump sheet helps there. You'll get scratch paper in your exam. Most VECs will do that. VE teams. In our team, we have people use the back of their answer sheet for scratch paper, and that'd be a place you could put it. Again, it's optional. Commit it to memory, practice reproducing it, and then it's there when you need it. A little bit more on the calculator. Takes a lot of the pain out of working formulas. It's inexpensive. I've got an Amazon link down here at the bottom. It's, I think, $21. I checked today on Amazon. If you go to a big box store, Staples and Office Depot, Office Max, whatever they're called now, their prices are about $30. And believe it or not, Walmart online is $21. So I'd go to Walmart or Amazon. Amazon, if you're a Prime member, of course, shipping is free, and it's quick. So $20, it's not a lot of money. Some of you may already have this calculator because we recommended it in the general class. If you took the general with us, we recommended that. Kind of an interesting thing, being a volunteer examiner, I always enjoy seeing when people show up to take exams. I don't know most of them, but if I see they've got this calculator, I say, that's one of our students. And usually that's the case. Kind of fun. So we're going to be doing class examples with this model. I've got written how-to guides that take you step by step through each of the problem types that you'll be facing. And it won't make any sense on a different calculator. Now the TI-36X Pro may be used during the exam. This is a partially true statement. We've had input from past students that said that when they went to take their test, the only thing they were allowed to use was a 4-function calculator. Well, that's nuts, okay? I mean, how are you going to do a square root or something like that on a 4-function calculator? But the VE teams, they're in charge when you go to take your test. The vast majority, though, are fine with it. Within the industry, certification exams of all flavors, state licensing exams, pretty much draw the line at what's called a graphing calculator. Because they'll store formulas, so they don't allow them in exams. The TI-36X Pro does not is not like that. So generally, it's fine. But my advice is find out from your testing team what they will allow, so you won't be surprised. And because our class time is constrained, if you choose not to use this calculator, we really won't have time to try to help you figure it out on a different calculator during, excuse me, during class. But I'm happy to help people offline should you want it. But then you're going to have to do trig, which you probably don't want to do. Next week, so we're going to introduce the extra class, how about the extra class?
You can't buy them in the mail.
Yeah, introduce the reference sheet, so I'll be sending out an attachment with that, so you'll have it in advance. Begin to learn and use the TI-36X Pro. We're going to start out with something as easy as turning it on and off. And we're going to actually work some very simple problems, 3 plus 4, and the square root of 7. I don't remember. I've got some examples we'll do together. And our goal for tonight and the next 2 weeks is to have you mostly up to speed with the tools, the calculator, before we get to chapter 4. So that's the point of the sessions that I'm doing. So we're going to have more fun next week. Now, see all of these happy people here? That's going to be one of you. You're going to be happy too when we go through all of this. So looking forward to our continuing series. And if you're watching us on YouTube, please let us know that you're there so we can get you on the mailing list so that you'll be able to get the advanced copies of things. And that's really all that I have for tonight. So the next major thing we're going to do is called Class Chat, which Gary will facilitate.
Okay, my mic is on, yay. So this is the time, if you've got any questions, comments, or whatnot, feel free. I'm going to go ahead and remove the spotlight in the Zoom classroom so that we can see your smiling faces. Any questions or comments? They're shy. All right, well, next week on Tuesday night, Chapter 2, so read the entire chapter. We'll go through the complete chapter in the first hour of class next week. We'll take a break and then come back with part 2 of Dave's presentation. So until then, we'll say 73.
Yep.
See you on the bands.